What's up, my wet little watermelon margaritas? This is Rob from The Gay Guy Plays, and if you haven't already caught on, we are being fruit cocktails to celebrate the upcoming new year. Regardless, today on The Daily Grind, we're going to be doing something that sort of follows suit. We'll be taking a look at this year's releases and deciding whether Warframe sucked in 2019. Now, there is a little bit of a backstory on this one. When I was coming up with my list of videos that I wanted to do for No to Weho, this was actually going to be my first. However, I went to the restroom and literally, as you do, I was scrolling through YouTube and Mogamu posted up that video and I was like, God damn it, a man can't take a shit without having his ideas yanked out from under him. So I'm actually going to go ahead and leave a link down in the description box below to his video. And then that upcoming Friday, they also went ahead and did a little bit of a rundown list on the dev stream. So I'm like, well, goddamn, I'm going to go ahead and give this idea some space. Let them live, let them shine, and then we'll go ahead and revisit it at a different time. So I'm actually going to be going off of the list that they had on the dev stream, and keep in mind that I actually recorded this video already previously. I think I'd mentioned it on Twitter as this 47-minute video, so expect this version to be just as long, maybe even a little bit longer, because I actually went ahead and outlined each of the different releases. And I also wanted to make note whether they were things that would impact the game as a long-term installment or something that was very basically hit it and quit it. So today, our judging scale is going to be hit, shit, or it exists. Because you know what? Sometimes there are things that maybe you're not super duper invested in, however somebody else may absolutely love, but you don't necessarily think it's a bright and shining beacon of the game, and that's why I wanted to go ahead and slip an it exists in there, because sometimes shit just exists. Alright, so let's go ahead and kick it off with the first release of 2019, which was Nightwave on February 27th, The Wolf of Saturn 6. Now, this was the premiere of Nightwave, and if I'm going to be completely honest with you, this was a massive hit in my book. I love the character of Nora Knight. I love the way that she was kind of implemented into the game. Again, this reminds me of Welcome to Night Vale. It's kind of like a story time that unfolds in different chapters, and I love just the whole like lore of it. I know that it's not necessarily lore that pertains directly to the operators, but it builds on the world outside. Now, back in the days, there was always talks about, ooh, people and colonies on these planets and that planet, but we never ever saw it in anything. So this kind of like gives us some outside perspective of someone who's not a Tenno and who's not involved in all of these old Orokin wars, giving us the tea on what's going on in the community, right? You like how I did that? So I'm gonna say it's a hit, and I'm also gonna say that it's long term. I'm gonna give it a little bit of a caveat, mainly because of the fact that the system itself is something that we're gonna see come through. However, it is kind of limited in how much we can do on a weekly basis, because as you guys know, we get a chunk of missions throughout the week. We do those missions and then that's it. So it is long-term content, but it's not heavily involved long-term content, if you know what I mean. Plus, and we'll address this in an upcoming one of their releases, they did actually make it so that you could go ahead and revisit some of the old missions that you may have missed, which is very, very handy, especially if you're just bored because there's no content and you don't necessarily want to jump into the game. Very nice for that. So let's go ahead and move on to the next item that they listed, which was Buried Depths on March 7th. Now, there are several little mini releases in there, which was, of course, Hildren was the Warframe. Now, for me personally, I really liked Hildren. I feel like she's been outshone by a couple of the other Warframes that were released this year. I really like the whole shield gating mechanic that they had. A lot of the things that kind of played into her passive. The rest of her kit wasn't necessarily, like, mind-blowing to me. Like, it still hurts my soul that we have the helicopter move. Y'all, you guys know I'm bad with names, but you know what I mean, the hover helicopter. And then the only thing that we can use is Balefire rockets in there. I wish that they would just scrap Balefire rockets completely, give us something else. And for everybody who's saying, my Balefire rockets do a shit ton of damage, yeah, to like unarmored targets. Listen, let's not get into all that. We're trying to have a good New Year's, okay? But Balefire sucks. The fact that you can only use Balefire in her ultimate also sucks. The rest of her kit, though, I think works quite well together. So me, I'm going to say it's a hit. Now, was this a long-term piece of content? I marked it here as potentially. Because here's the thing. while Hildren isn't necessarily like the love of my life, and I'm like, oh my god, Hildren is the best thing ever, I think that she could be long-term content for somebody who really, really enjoys playing Hildren. That's not necessarily me, so I'm putting that as a potential long-term, but specifically, in my case, there's a lot of Warframes that come out that are literally level them up, form them up a couple times, so that like takes a night, you know, maybe go ahead and play around with a couple different builds. That is maybe over the span of 3 days. That's like 3 days worth of content. That's not, in my eyes, long-term content, but for somebody who really does truly love Hildren, that could be long-term content. Moving along, we had the Exploiter Orb. Okay, now, don't get me wrong. I really love the Exploiter Orb. I love the voice acting. Like, wow. Warframe's voice acting is, like, really, really good this year. Everybody's getting the hots for the new Sentient dude. They're like, ooh, daddy. I'm like, wow, y'all are really thirsty. But we cannot lie that the Exploiter Orb, the voice acting on that was absolutely fantastic. And then they came up with these kind of little vignettes when you would pull the Exploiter Orb apart to expose weak spots, which I thought was kind of cinematic and cool. It also kind of stressed one of DE's biggest issues for me, is that they're great with making fun content, and a lot of this kind of like, oh, I feel so cool content, but not necessarily good at making difficult content. Because if you guys had watched the video that I actually did on accidentally running into the Exploiter Orb, I got it into its like final stages on the very first try using a Loki, not really knowing what the fuck I was doing. So clearly, like, I didn't have any kind of meta, I didn't have any forethought beforehand, and I was still able to take down this, you know, boss. So for me personally, the Exploiter Orb, it just exists. You get the loot from the Exploiter Orb, everything that you need out of it, and then you're done. So for me, it exists, it was fun, voice acting was great, but it's definitely not long-term content. DE hasn't kind of like gone back in and maybe, you know, maybe even implemented the third spider and maybe made some sort of like trifecta of rewards that work with each other. Something along those lines. They haven't done anything like that. So Exploiter Orb, very short term. Next up, we have Melee Phase 1. This was basically just fast switching. You just kind of like switched. I can't really say anything positive or negative about it. Like, of course, it was the first step to a bigger rework. So I want to say it exists. It's a rework. So I don't necessarily know if I'm going to call that long term or not. Because even when we get a rework, sometimes it's just like you play it and then that's it. So, so far, the only thing that we've had for long-term content, I want to point out, is the Wolf of Saturn 6 Nightwave. Next up, we have the potential PoE, or the PoE remaster, which was April 4th. One of the things that was released in that, which was the Thumper. Now, in my opinion, that was shit. The thing about it is, yeah, we got this new boss that randomly spawns in the plains and they drop some resources for you. Cool. Like, at the end of the day, I'm not even sure that the Thumper is memorable enough to really like highlight, we made the Thumper. I was like, okay, great. Like it was a place to like drop a couple weapon blueprints, and you know, something to make plushies out of, which to be honest with you, I still don't give a fuck about. So I thought that was absolute shit. And that was also not long term, because it's not like anybody's like, oh my god, I've been playing the Thumper fight for the last fucking 3 weeks, it's amazing. You know, not long term. Next up, we have Conservation. I know some people like this, and I need to respect the fact that people like this. Because me personally, you know, I like things like Arcwing, I like things like Railjack. I know I'm gonna say it, I like Railjack. But this is something that I personally could not give a flying fuck about. Whether it's on Venus, whether it's on Earth, this to me was like wasted resources of like some other thing you could have been sinking a game mode into. This was just like not it for me, but I'm gonna give it an it exists. And here's the thing, with Conservation, what's the long-term benefits for it? Floofs? Like Syndicate standing? I mean, when was the last time that they added anything into the Syndicates that is like worthy of mentioning, right? So to me, not long term. Next up, they had the Economy Remaster. Now, here's the thing. I'm gonna flip it around because we had a shit, we had exists, and now we got a hit. I love the Economy Remaster. I no longer have to fucking, like, stress over, like, what fish I need to catch in order to make the bait for another fish. I no longer have to sit there and say, okay, well, I gotta get this fish, and I gotta get this ore, and then I can turn it into this, what do you call this? This Exodia. I don't have to worry about any of that. You just purchase it, and it's done. And I'm like, hallelujah. Thank you. Thank you, Jesus. So I'm very happy with that. I think that it was a hit, but at the same time, it's also not long-term, because what else did they really add to kind of like feed off of that, right? Like at the end of the day, fishing is great for standing, right? We use that standing to earn what? You haven't added any new Zaws. You haven't added any new Exodias. Like, you might have added some new floofs. But really? Like, why am I sitting here fishing with all of this bait that you remastered the economy for, but you didn't actually go ahead and give us anything new to purchase with that stuff? Just putting it out there. Just putting it out there. So, moving along, we have the Jovian Concord, which released May 22nd. And this came with Wisp. Oh, okay. Everybody's been asking me to do a Warframe of 2019, or Warframes of 2019, my favorite ones. Wisp was one of those surprise Warframes that I really like. I enjoy finding little mechanics within the synergies of the Warframes, and that really definitely enthralls me, and Wisp was actually really great. Thank you, Faven, for making such a beautiful Grack skin for her. Also, dad-ass though. So for me, all in all, I loved Wisp's mobilities, and I think that this is buffs done well, right? We've always had buffs from other Warframes where you had to make sure that you were, like, out recasting them on your group of allies, which really, your allies are, like, fucking all over the place. But in this way, Wisp is like, I'm putting down these goddamn buffs right here. You can see them on your mini-map. If you want them, go get them, okay? Like, I'm not responsible for buffing you. You're responsible for buffing yourself, okay? And then in addition, if she wants to buff herself, she can teleport her ass back on over there using her Breach Surge. So a part of me was like, I like this. I like this very much. The only thing that really flopped for me was her big old sun laser. Like, you know, the sun is a deadly laser. Unless you wear an SPF, which, by the way, that's why I'm shiny. I wear moisturizer and SPF. You should too, because the sun is a deadly laser. Unless you're wearing SPF. So, to me, Wisp was definitely a hit, and again, with Warframes, potentially a long-term release for somebody who really loves Wisp. Now, is Wisp enough for me to be like, oh, she's like a long-term favorite, like, oh, she is long-term content for me? I'm gonna say not really, but I definitely enjoyed playing her, and I definitely, like her when someone brings her in a railjack and she'll put her buffs around and be like, oh, bitch, thank you, I appreciate it. You know what I mean? So in that way, I do appreciate her, but she's not necessarily the be-all, end-all for me. Moving on, we have the Robo Lawless, which, by the way, it seems like I can say fairly accurately, which is a shocker because of all of the other things I can't say here in Warframe. Now, the Robo Lawless was definitely one of those things that disappointed the motherfucking shit out of me. It was such a, oh. Because for those of you guys who weren't there, the Robo Lawless was actually supposed to be another Eidolon on the plains. So here I am thinking, oh, we're going to get, you know, a different variation because we have the Terrorist and the Hydralist and the Guanchalist, like fantastic, but they're really the same models of the same thing, and it's really the same mechanics that you use to take them down. Is really nothing that changes the meta on that. It's just a bigger, different colored version. It's kind of like the end of Mass Effect 3. Pick one. They all basically do the same thing. So me personally, that was a big letdown that this was not going to be a boss out in the plains that was going to be a challenge and that was going to challenge us in a different way. We'd have a different meta to approach it with. However, what I will say about the Robo Lawless is it's a fun boss fight. It again reminds me of the fact that DE is great at making fun things that don't challenge you. Because let's be honest, when you get into a Robo Lawless fight now that everybody's figured it out, that thing is dead within moments. It's dead. It's so dead so fast. And I get that there's like a little bit of lore behind it. And, you know, for the lore fiends, fantastic. You know, you get a little snippet of what's going on with that treacherous space mom. Just saying. But for me, the Robo Lawless just exists in like a bitter state. It's not even like, oh, it exists. It's like, oh, it exists. You know, it's like that kind of feeling. And it's also not long term. Like, there's no real reason to revisit the Robo Lawless at any point in time. You play it, you get your amalgam mods, and you move the fuck on, right? So for me personally, another short-term flop. Then they had the Jupiter Remaster. Now, I actually think that this was not terrible. I really like the way that the tile set looked. And this goes for the PoE Remaster too, because I didn't mention that. They made it look pretty. They made PoE look prettier. That's pretty much it. But with the Jupiter Remaster, they redid the tile sets. They introduced new enemy types, which were the amalgams. They also introduced the amalgam mods, and there was more lore that kind of came along with it. However, the amalgams don't really, like, they're weird because they're part sentient, and all sentient shit is kind of weird. But at the end of the day, they didn't really dramatically change gameplay in any way, shape, or form. Amalgam mods, we haven't seen any new ones and have not had any new ones introduced into those game modes at all yet. The lore is fantastic because I love how fucking sleazy Alad V still is. And yet y'all decided to help him out versus, what was it, Fraudbeck? Or was it the other? Listen, all the corpus look alike to me. I sound like racist, but towards the corpus. It's not true. I love my corpus brethren, okay? So to me, the Jupiter Remaster, it existed, but it's not long-term. You know why? Because there's no reason for me to revisit that tile set unless it's on a fissure, unless it's on a sortie. There's no real reason for me to go back. So personally, that is not going to be a long-term either. Now, the one thing that was long-term was the introduction of the Disruption game mode, and holy camole, I like it. I like it a lot. I really, really enjoy the Disruption game mode. It requires you to pay attention to the map. It requires you to pay attention to the audio because you can hear the whoop, 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 and you can see the little flashy things on the screen. It's a really engaging game mode, and the way that they've structured it is if you do well on all of your, like, protecting the, you know what I'm talking about, the thing with the key, you know what I'm saying? Whenever you protect those, you know, you actually get a better chance at better loot. So for me, all in all, I thought the Disruption was one of the biggest hits of the year. However, we'll discuss a little bit of an issue with that later on. So this was one of the things that absolutely stuck and has climbed to be one of my favorites. So definitely a hit and definitely long term. Now they actually had another release with the Jovian Concord, which is the Wukong Revisit. I thought the Wukong Revisit was so freaking fast. Then don't get me wrong too. I know a lot of people were like, I hate Wukong, like previous to the rework, yada yada yada. I didn't hate Wukong previous to the rework. I was fine with Wukong. I was like, I don't mind a set it or forget it frame. I actually remember in yesterday's video, or earlier today's video, they're like, he doesn't care. He cares about difficult content, but doesn't care about weapon balance. I sure as hell fucking don't. I don't. And it goes to show because I loved Wukong because he's just invincible. I don't give a shit. Like, I want difficult content that challenges me on that I'm invincible level. What the fuck do you have for me? So Wukong was definitely one of those ones that people were kind of bored with, but I enjoyed playing him. And with the rework, he just got so much more engaging. And not only that, DE showed that they could fucks with some AI shit. Because that, let me tell you, Celestial Twin, oh, that shit's a madman. They're aggressive as fuck. They will hunt down whatever they gotta hunt down. They are not playing any goddamn games. And I love it. I love the fact that DE kind of flexed and say we can do something with AI. And I hope that DE implements that with enemy types as well, so that hopefully we can see something very similar in the future when it comes to bumping up the difficulty of Warframe. Fuck with that AI. Try out some shit. If we get murdered in the process, listen, we'll figure it out. We got revives. It's not like we have to pay for them anymore. So for me personally, I thought that Wukong Revisit was a hit. Now, was it a long-term hit? Again, with Warframes, I say that it's a potential long-term. If you enjoy playing Wukong and he's like your favorite of all times, then this may have had you set for a long period of time. But me personally, no. I'm gonna say it's a potential long-term hit for me. It was a long-term hit for me, but at the end of the day, it's a potential long-term hit just for people who enjoy playing Wukong. All right? So we'll give you that much. Now, the next one we've got is July 6th, which is the Emissary. So this was another addition to the Nightwave series, and I love this storyline. I also really like the first storyline, the Wolf of Saturn 6 one. It kind of gave this like little like noir kind of vibe to it, because you're like tracking down this escaped inmate, and I love that storyline. But the Emissary was a fucking great storyline, and whoever's writing this shit, I hope they continue writing it, because this told a very eerie story, and I thought that it was gonna end in a certain way, and it didn't. It ended in a much quieter, much creepier way, and really set up the Infested to kind of like evolve. It also kind of opened up the door to, you know, the, what is it called? The Zealot Prelates that we've seen later on, like as later releases in the Derelict. Love that game mode. It's for some reason not mentioned anywhere on their list, but it kind of opened it up to like, oh, the Infested are getting smart. And I'm like, ooh, chills. We also got like the cool shoulder piece. We got the operator armor out of it. However, the one thing that I was really, really disappointed in is, oh wait, no, that's the next part. So I wasn't disappointed in this one at all. Again, it was a hit. Do we want to call it long-term? Because I'm going to say Nightwave in general is long-term. So I'm going to use that encapsulating tune for Nightwave. Now, we're going to actually pause here, mainly because of the fact that I wanted to do a first half check-in. Specifically because somebody in the comments earlier today made the stupidest quote it set me off. And I was like, Rob, don't respond to it, because legitimately, if you get into like this thread, it's like 26 messages deep. Everybody was going at it. But I saw this one. This one was the thing that triggered me the most, because it's so fucking stupid. Like, the layers of stupid in this was just like, wow, I don't know how dumb you have to be to legitimately believe this. But they said, and this is just a snippet of their whole quote, everyone in the community was brainwashed by the content creators that there was a content drought when there really wasn't any. This fool trying to tell me that there was no goddamn content drought. So I was like, listen, bitch, instead of necessarily replying to you in the comment section, what I'm going to do, because I know this video is coming out, is we're going to take a look at the first half of the year. The only two long-term pieces of content that you could really replay was Nightwave, and that was capped. You got so many things to play in a week, and Disruption. But keep in mind, at this point in time, in the first 6 months of the year, there's only that one node of Disruption. There was only one node of Disruption, and it had been added in May, June, July. So we had 3 months of nothing, and then we had one node of Disruption. And get this, that node of Disruption didn't even have good rewards. So you gonna sit here and you really gonna say, oh, the content creators were brainwashing people into the fact that there was a content drought when there wasn't any. 6 months. And the only thing we get a third, like half of the way through that 6 months, is one game mode. One motherfucking game mode? Okay, let's clarify this real quick. And I need you to remember this, and I need this to stick in your head. Not all content is good content. Not all content is long-term content, all right? Because here's the thing. If I gave you a plate of dog food and made you eat it with the thought process of, it's food, eat it. You really gonna eat that? I mean, maybe if you're hungry enough, you'll eat the dog food, because apparently all food is not created equal, just like all content is not created equal. So when we say there's a content drought, we usually mean there's a content drought of good content. And we'll get into good content later on in this video, but listen, I'm not naming you, but I'm gonna need you to take a seat. but not on a chair. I need you on the ground because you don't get a seat here at Mama's house by acting that dumb. You can do a little Asian squat in the corner if you want, though, if you don't want to get your butt dirty, but you ain't getting a seat here, okay? Rob rant over. Let's go ahead and jump into some better things, like the Saint of Ultra, which was introduced August 29th. So basically, in September. This is the 9th month. Keep in mind, this is the 9th month of the year. Out of 12 months, this is last quarter kind of shit. All right, we got Goss. Now, Goss to me was a hit. Was a motherfucking hit. I saw Goss. I saw the previews of Goss. I'm like, he's stupid. This frame is dumb. And this is why I need to like really pay attention to the shit that I have an initial visceral reaction to, because I hated Archwing when they previewed it. I was like, this is stupid. And to be honest with you, I hated Railjack, and like I'm still kind of really getting my bearings around everything in Railjack. Like literally I just took on some engineering stuff which I had fun with. But anyway, Goss was another one of those ones where I was like, he looks real dumb. He looks like Volt 2.0. He's a stanky piece of ass cheese. I'm not into it, right? And then they released him. And then they showed all of the mechanics that were behind him, the synergies with his abilities, the fact that if you maintain battery charge and you combined it with his ultimate and you combined it with his 2, you could go ahead and get like moments of invulnerability. And basically, you know, they stole an interceptor from Anthem and they put them in Warframe. And I love the Anthem's interceptor. It's so good. Listen, if you want to fight me on this one, I can literally go ability for ability for ability on the interceptor for you and let you know where everything overlaps, because they do. Okay? Don't fight me on interceptors. I know interceptors. I love interceptors. I want to hug interceptors. And basically, Goss was an interceptor from Anthem introduced into Warframe. And they were a hit. Now again, for me, I listed this as potential long-term. In my eyes, he's a long-term like item. I love playing him so much. He's really, really freaking fun. So Goss would have definitely been, ooh, do I want to say he would have been my Warframe of the Year? He might have been my Warframe of the Year, aside from Loki. Loki's always my Warframe of every year, but like Goss is potentially my Warframe of this year. Just putting that out there. So definitely a long-term thing for me, but not necessarily a long-term thing for everyone. Next up, they listed the Laverian. Dear Lord, sweet Jesus. You listed the Laverian as a piece of content. The Laverian is a room where a man talks to you. He doesn't even have a body. He's just a disembodied voice. I hope to God he's secretly a Cephalon, and then that would make more sense why there isn't a physical body in the room. Is he like God? Is he like the ominous thing of God? And then you put a donation box in there, and I put in 10 million credits, and I still didn't get nothing but like a voice line. It wasn't even a very good voice. There was no dancing. There was no like applause. The man didn't go, hey, you donated a mil, woo, you know? So I'm like, there was no celebration. We got little cards out of it. The cards were pretty. I mean, are the cards going to play a role later on down the line? No. So please, this was shit, and it's not long term. All right, so we've got the Disruption expansion. Now, this was not a hit at first, but I'm going to give it a hit because later down the line, they fixed it. Now, for those of you guys who don't remember, the Disruption expansion also launched with 2 new kind of like challenge disruptions. One in Lua and one in the Kuva Fortress. Number 1, the Kuva Fortress, to this day, still has not been fucking fixed. The Kuva returns from that game mode are poor. Not only are they poor, but also the rewards for each round are also poor in comparison to just standard Kuva survival. So what's the fucking point of introducing a game mode that is poor in comparison to the other game modes that are already offered? It doesn't even compete all that well. It's fun, yes, it's engaging, but guess what? The rewards, if you look at the rewards, it's just not even a point in playing it. So me, to this day, I'm still angry about Kuva Disruption. Kuva Disruption could have been a banger, but y'all dropped the ball on that. Next up, we of course have that Lua Disruption. Remember that Lua Disruption and Umbral Echoes? This was the point in time. So keep in mind, again, at our first half check-in, the only thing that was long-term releases was Nightwave, which was long-term, and Disruption, which was one game mode, but I'm still giving it the long-term clip. So we hadn't really had anything for the first 6 months, and they were hitting us with motherfucking Umbral Echoes. Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here. And then they exchanged that with Universal Medallions, but they were like kind of universal, but not really, because you couldn't use them in PvP, so they were like universal-ish. I'm like, thanks, I guess. What the fuck is the point of that? Right? So me personally, I was just like, no. Now they did turn their shit around with a later on release where they went ahead and made it so that you could get vaulted, well, when the vaults were out, you could get vaulted relics from Disruption. In addition to that, they also upped the rarity of the different kind of relics you can get there. So me personally, Disruption, after some tweaking, keep in mind, like my whole body moved that after some tweaking, is a hit. And I think that it is a long-term hit, but not initially. All right? And then we go into Look Link and Mod Link, which they made a little video for, you know, it's so cool. Who here is using Look Link and Mod Link? Because I've maybe used it I've used it publicly maybe twice, and then I've used it privately to link my looks from Excalibur Prime to my Excalibur when I was doing the Excalibur Deluxe Collection review, so that way I could keep my Flesh Caliber, but I just had to put it in a different place. But aside from that, I'm not using it. So I want to know, are you using it? How often do you use it? Is it a big thing for you? Because for me, I'm going to put it as exists, and it's not long-term. So right here, keep in mind, that's the end of September. Now we have another release coming at the end of October, okay? And I need to stress this. Another release at the end of October. So it's November. We're in the last 2 months of the year, and the only hit that DE has had was Disruption. That's it. And I don't even know if they fixed it at this point. So I'm just saying, we're in basically November, December territory, and DE still hasn't had a hit. Now, on October 31st, they released the Old Blood update. And for me, this is what really changed things for me. Number one, let's hit it with Grendel. To me, Grendel wasn't a hit. I was not fond of Grendel. I didn't think that his gameplay was all that enthralling, but I did go ahead and kind of like make a video on Grendel saying Grendel has all of the works of being a really, really good Warframe, but for some reason he didn't jive with me. And this is why for all of the Warframes that I've, listed out, they've all been tagged as potential long-term, because not every Warframe is gonna stick with you forever. Grendel, for me, he ticks the boxes. You get the CC, you get the survivability, you get the damage. There's a lot. There's armor stripping, yada, 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 so on and so forth. He's like a fun little meme, sack of meatballs, right? But unfortunately, he didn't click with me. I'm sure he clicks with other people, and that's why I put every single Warframe on this list as a potential long-term. And unfortunately for me, Grendel just exists. I wouldn't say he's shit, but he definitely just exists. Next up, Liches. Oh, this is a contentious one. I really like Kuba Liches. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, I come from the era of RPGs where you literally had to grind resources for your epic weapons, and epic weapons would take maybe a month, potentially 2 to 3 months of farming materials, doing quests, and then, taking on world bosses that sometimes your, raid would wipe on, sometimes they wouldn't wipe on, sometimes RNG would not drop the part for you, but it would drop a part for somebody else, or sometimes you would drop the part, but then you would have to use your DKP on something else because, I don't know, somebody bid higher on it. Like, there's just a lot of different reasons. So I come from that era. So farming, doesn't really bother me that much. What really bothers me about Liches, however, is the amount of RNG. Because with farming, it's linear. I need 75 more of this resource. I need to gather this one specific resource from this one type of enemy. I need to beat this one boss, yada, 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 so on and so forth, right? But the Liches are just, you gotta get the right relic, which has the right, what is it called? Oh, Parazon, like, oh, I don't even remember what it's called. Requiem mods. You had to get the right Requiem relics. To get the right Requiem mods, you had to, like, get the appropriate drop of the 2 Requiem mods that are there. So that's already, like, 1 layer because you had to get the relic. Then, of course, you have to get the mod. Then, on top of that, once your Lich comes around, it's 3 different ones that you don't know what they are. You don't know what order they are. So that's another bit of RNG. And then, of course, the weapon that you get is also RNG. And, of course, if they have an ephemera, that's another layer of RNG. So, me in total, I'm gonna give Liches a hit. And I know that some of y'all want to hit me now for that. I'm sorry. I really enjoy it. Like, to me, I've always said that I felt like farming Liches was like knitting for the evening. You just sit down, turn on something, farm some murmurs, kill a Lich, get a weapon, convert it, whatever. And then, you know, the next day you do a little bit more. So for me, I want to say that it is long term because it is something that they can expand upon in the future. They've talked about introducing like corpus type liches, like different kinds of ways to like trade them and so on. I think the trading thing's already in there, except I haven't done it yet. But you know, all of these different like layers that involve the liches. They also said that the Parazon was going to have more lore implications, so on and so forth. So I'm going to say that liches are a hit, and I'm going to say that they're long term. Don't be mad at me, please. Next thing, they listed the Parazon. This thing exists. I don't think it's really long term, aside from maybe the story elements that are kind of like tied to it. The Parazon is literally just that little blade on your wrist that you use to pull down the mechanics for your railjack. I mean, and then you stab enemies with it, but literally you could stab enemies with sword too, so I don't know. I don't know where DE was going with that, but personally, the Parazon just exists, not long term. Next up, we have the Ember Revisit. I think that this was a hit. That was, dare I say, the Ember rework was the rework of the year? Oh my god, don't get mad at me. Is it? I think that it might have been the rework of the year, because I never reached for Ember. Like, every now and then I'd be like, oh, I want to be a fire chicken. Like, let me, you know, set things around me on fire. Like, let me give them a little stun. But I never reached for Ember. Now there are times where I'm like, oh yeah, I could go for a little Ember play. I could crave a little bit of Ember. You know what I mean? It's like Diet Mountain Dew. Y'all know I'm a Coke Zero boy. Y'all know I also like my Diet Root Beer. But every now and then I get a little hankering for some Diet Mountain Dew. I'm like, it's a little change to what we've got going on. And the fact that I feel like she's just more usable, and I know that there are going to be some people that vehemently disagree, and that's totally fine. But I feel like the Ember Revisit was a hit. Now, was it long term? I'm going to put this in the same category of Warframes because there's some people that don't give a shit about Ember, could never give a shit about Ember, or once gave a shit about Ember and no longer give a shit about Ember. So this is just for the people that really enjoyed Ember. The Vauban rework. I'm going to just say it now. It exists. I still, at the end of the day, and I need to stress this, Vauban will only ever feel powerful when the enemies are really powerful. And that's something maybe to discuss when we jump into the whole Railjack topic in a different video. But as it stands, when they did the Vauban revisit, I'm like, oh, so Vauban just got a couple new toys. Cool. To me, Vauban doesn't feel any different. To me, Vauban doesn't play any different. The only thing that is really, like, startlingly different to me is the Teslas. Beyond that, couldn't give a shit. Like, I've been playing him recently as an engineer on a ship. It's so thematic. I love it. But really, I feel like it exists. I feel like he's gotten some better quality of life upgrades. But at the end of the day, I don't feel like much has changed about him. Really, what changes with Vauban is when enemies are difficult enough for Vauban to be needed. So, unless DE changes enemies, Vauban's still gonna be Vauban. Now, And of course, he goes into potential long-term as well. Melee Phase 2. I thought that this was a hit. Now, Melee Phase 2, of course, had all of the different melee combo changes, had the heavy attacks reintroduced, had some forced procs on certain things, took away finishers for other things. Oh my god, my heart's still breaking over Nikana's and that forced finisher loss. Yes, I tried to hit the Parazon button to do the finisher, but it doesn't work. It's not there anymore. But the one thing that I will say about Melee Phase 2, which I find to be really, really interesting, is this really kind of like shifted the meta in such a way as, are you a combo based player where you like to hold on to your combos? Here's one build. Are you a heavy based player? Here's another build. So there's like, it really split off into two different areas, and it kind of was really cool because it felt like status-based weapons got to live in the world of stacking combo, and then all of the crit-based weapons got moved into a world where they were like, okay, let's stack a shit ton of crit and a shit ton of base damage and get in some crazy slash procs. So they lived in the heavy camp. And I kind of like that division. It makes, you know, people, it gives people different options to play in different ways. Now, I can't wait to see what happens when they actually release Melee 3.0 in its fullness, because I think it's 2.999997 at the moment, because they still haven't put in the kind of limit bar, and I'm really curious to see how that goes. Like, is it basically just channeling? I mean, just, you can tell me now, I'm just saying. So part of me is like, okay, I can't wait to see exactly what happens with all of that, because it could be a really, really big hit. So I'm going to list this as potential long-term. We'll have to see its implications, because as it stands now, you put your build onto your weapon, maybe you put a couple of different formas into it, and then you're done and you just play using that weapon. But there's nothing that really completely redefines that game, that part of the game. So we'll see what happens with the channeling. It could be potential long-term, but that's basically that. Now we're going to go ahead and end this with November 22nd, the Rising Tide, because this video has gone on for way too fucking long, which of course is the Dry Dock and the Quest. I know that some people said that they didn't like this. I actually did like this. I didn't give a shit about the storyline. Like, I like Sai better than I like some other Cephalons out there. But in my head, like, you gotta give me more than that for me to be really interested. You know, yeah, we got a finger. I see, we got a finger. Okay, whatever. But for me, the whole, how do I put this? It didn't really do anything, but it gave us time to farm the shit we needed to farm, and then we had to wait. Some people were impatient or like, we want it now, we want it now. Okay, fine, whatever. Like, at the end of the day, for me, it wasn't great and it wasn't bad. It exists and it's not long term, even though it felt like it was long term waiting for the shit to craft. So if we look at the entirety of the year, there were definitely a good plethora of hits on DE's part. But if you'll notice, a lot of the hits were just like short-term hits or potential long-term hits, depending on, you know, like if it was a Warframe that you liked and you enjoyed their rework, or how you view certain remasters, like with Melee 3.0. But the only like shining things that I would put on this list are Disruption, Nightwave, and Liches. Now, Railjack is up for some chats. I'm going to play even more of it just to let you guys know. Like I said, I'm 888 all across the board because I like being Mr. Arcwing Man, and we're going to work on, you know, some more intrinsics. But Railjack could also be potentially long-term. And if you noticed, the only long-term thing that we had in the first half of the year was that one disruption node. And then slowly it began to unfold towards the end of the year. So was Warframe shit in 2019? Warframe was definitely shit for the first half. Warframe was definitely shit for part of the second half. But they really did show some dedication to turning that around towards the end of the year. And I don't know if it's maybe they were hearing the narrative like through the first half of the year and they're like, okay, we really got to figure some shit out. And they're only able to pull their shit together towards the latter half of the year. I don't know what it is. but I think that they know that they can't rest on their laurels anymore. Because we are going to put pressure on them. As a community, we should definitely hold them accountable for the things that they release and make sure that when they release it, it's released in a good state. And right now, you know, Railjack definitely needs some polishing. They said that they're going to do an overhaul on Archwingoos, which I'm really kind of worried about. Please don't hurt my Amisha. Not my Syndicates, please. You've already taken away hit scan. Don't take away anymore. But if you notice, for the majority of the year, Warframe was shit. And towards the end of the year, less shit. And I think that's the way that I want to leave it as. In my personal opinion, Warframe was kind of shitty this year. But it started to get better at the end. If not get better, the devs' attitudes towards putting in some work to polish the shit that they've released and really paying attention to their long-term releases, that's when shit got better. Is when they started saying, okay, we really got to make sure this shit hits. Because all of the other things, yeah, there's a lot of dog food out there. It's food. Somebody can eat it if they really, really want to. But I deserve to spend my time with better content. Especially as a paying customer to Warframe. As someone who paid. I skipped one. I skipped one Prime Access, okay? Okay? I just bought the most recent one. And I bought a couple skins too, so don't be mad at me. But I will end this on a really, really interesting note. One thing that did not show up on their list at all, the Shazwin. Because the Shazwin isn't content. It's dog food. So if you choose to consume that in your downtime when there's no other food, feel free. But I'd rather go spend my money on food elsewhere. And just keep in mind, I don't have all the money in the world. So if my money is going somewhere else, that means it's not going to Warframe. That means that it's not going to pay people on the payroll, and it's not going towards helping them keep their lights on. Just saying. And if enough people get tired of eating dog food, they also are going to stop paying for dog food. All right? So in 2020, let's stop paying for dog food, and let's hope that Warframe isn't shitty for most part of the year. However, at the end, the future is looking bright, so I did want to go ahead and leave you guys with that. It's looking better, and I'm excited to see it get better. Regardless, that's going to do it for me for now. Thank you guys for sticking through another 47-minute long video, and as always, love somebody, hurt nobody, and don't eat dog food. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye!